Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. Let's hop in. So we've got this new festival going on. Now I said I wasn't really likely to make any footage, or I didn't think I was going to make any footage uh, yesterday, Thursday, but it actually did. I actually did get around to playing some of the new game I'm covering, Chariot. It's frankly an incredibly boring game. It seems like really what it was some company was working on a physics engine for surfaces, whether or not like the ground affects certain characters versus other characters, um, which inherently I don't think Unreal Engine 5 or Unity um, even now supports great systems as far as surfaces go. We're immediately having drop frames again on this Friday, which, yeah, I think that once again probably just highlights that we've got a lot of festival missions extra to do. I think that probably highlights that my network issues have always been 100% the internet service provider, AT&T, that I'm using, and yeah, I've seen enough inconsistency issues to make me not want to deal with that. The Dual Pass is um, up. Interestingly, though, I believe the price has gone up. It's still effectively free as long as you level up to the max level, and there still are only 100 levels. So unless they sneakily changed how much XP you needed to go up a level, you're still kind of fine. But previously, I believe it was 600, and you got 600 crystals back. Now it's 800, so it's a bigger upfront commitment to get Dual Pass Gold. But we'll take that off the table now. But yeah, at its core, the Game Chariot is a very slow, boring platformer with very little going in there. There's maybe 5 types of enemies throughout the whole game. Really, I've only seen 2, and I haven't even seen a level that has 2 different types of enemies in the level. It's just like there was one type of enemy and then another. In fact, I may not have even seen 2 types. So these decks here, these loner decks, let you only have 1 card of each. There's basically no way I'd be able to make a regular deck, which is fine because the rewards probably are the same whether or not you play with a loner deck or your own custom built deck, although that wasn't the case originally. So this is going to be a very different type of experience. Now, by limiting people down to 1 card, that is a very ham-fisted way of potentially having people play with new cards and different cards, but at best, a deck is going to have 40 cards in it. Like, it's 40 cards plus 15 extra. It's hardly going to take a big dent into the potential 7,000 cards in Master Duel. What they'd really need to do is come from the bottom up, not from the top down, as far as limiting things, and say you can only play Harpy's deck in effect in a festival, like something like that, where you can only play Fiends, or you can only play Pendulum cards, or you can only play Dragons. Go from that class, so you can only play Divine Light cards or water cards. come from that top up. Even doing that still probably gives you thousands of cards to play as. And the loner decks are still going to have to help there. The other thing about Chariot, certainly as being a floaty, very slow platformer, is that it's supposed to be focused on a co-op, as a co-op game, and honestly it would just be considerably worse if it was used as a co-op. Okay, what would this special summon instead? Let's go ahead and attack first. Let's go ahead and then play this, and summon this. He's gonna do Ash Blossom, so we'll activate this to undo Ash Blossom. But yeah, honestly, as far as the accountability section, I don't have really a lot to say about Chariot. I'm just gonna burn through it fairly quickly. I also need to schedule I need to schedule more videos. Are these rocket cards? Palm your hand into defense position. Do I have a rocket card in the graveyard? I do. Apparently this was a rocket card also. Let's keep on going. Let's take this one, I guess. I don't know if either one of these are better. Yeah, let's see what this does. Destroy that. Apparently that can't be destroyed. Probably means this can't be destroyed. So yeah, not doing great here as I'm trying to figure out this whole system as far as these new kinds of cards. Otherwise, as far as the accountability section, I guess we're pretty well done already. It's just really hot and let's see. Let's do that. And then let's try this. We need one of these. Well, we're making progress very slowly, but I'm out of cards at this point, so I'm sure I'm gonna lose. Okay, summon this. Activate an effect. Summon that. And he concedes. Alright, fine. We'll take a concession and move on. That was definitely a bit of a learning experience, and we still have a lot to learn in the first place, and we have a far way to go, but if we could get a lot of free victories or surrenders, that'd be great. Scum VM is adding this Imtropolis engine, which is, I think, more kind of like Macromedia Flash based games, as they're kind of expanding more and more. You can see there's a lot of Magic School Bus games being mentioned here, Muppet Treasure Island. A lot of these games I don't recognize. Star Trek the Game Show, what in the world is that? No big ticket names here, but in all fairness, even the Scum VM games arguably would not be games I would have recognized if it weren't for the Scum VM engine. There, we got another quick disconnect, and we probably are just having network trouble, and that's where we're getting these free disconnects, and I'm more than willing to just ride those victories out because I don't want to waste a lot of time. Yeah, I really just don't want to waste a lot of time doing the festival or playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Like every collectible card game I've wanted, whenever they have one of these special events, it turns into a occasion that uses a lot of extra time up. And certainly I have other things to do. The Epic Game Store, oddly, has updated a ratings and poll system, which is something they kind of said they were never going to do. Is that they were never going to let, I guess, maybe reviews happen, and maybe they're sticking to the letter of the law without really being to the spirit of the law. But their claim is that there would be they would never let, like, review bombs, whatever those really are, which honestly there's been about one legitimate review bomb in my experience ever, and the rest have all been just creators complaining about people with legitimate complaints complaining. Okay. Start with this. See if that leads to something. No. We need a dark one. In which way does it point? Points to the left. Hmm. Hmm. Okay. And see, this can't be special summoned into the extra monster zone, though, so that one actually is somewhat deceptive. I'm not 100% sure where the polls really come into that. I guess it's just general yes or no questions. Or nope, seems like here can be different responses. But it also seems like the game creators are the ones creating the polls and not just random people making the polls around the game. It also potentially seems like, if I was to guess, just completely baselessly, I'd suspect that some game developers have the ability to disable reviews and ratings. Yeah, that would be my suspicion. This was gonna destroy it anyways. Then destroying that, bringing that back to the hand is a mistake, but whatever. Susan Wojcicki, who allegedly is the YouTube CEO, although I question what she really does, and I have to say it every time. She's talking about Beauty Fest and some YouTuber that I don't even know about, but I really wanted to point out her congratulating Mark Roebler on the launch of his STEM box, effectively, Crunch Labs, and building a whole laboratory, which it really comes off as what was the name of that channel that does all the action stunts? I want to call them the Dude Bros, but I don't think that really is what they call themselves. But Mark Rober is a YouTuber who made packages that would like have GPS tracking in them, set off fart spray, fling out confetti, and he was basically doing instant karma, or at least pretending like he was doing it. I think most of what he was doing was legitimate, although I think that there has been controversy that a couple people straight up knew that they were stealing these packages and acting. Regardless, it was this very light vigilante justice thing he would do once a year, and then he'd pretty much not make any YouTube videos at all. And he got success, and good for him. And then it seems like he very possibly has just sold out. We have Andrew Murphy on the chat saying, yo, hi. Like, it really does just come off as, alright, I've gotten some small success now. I've partnered with somebody secretly in the back, some production company, undoubtedly has gotten into business with him. I mean, I kind of think he was a YouTube employee in the first place, but like now he has this whole secret laboratory with a secret entrance. He's got this giant facility. He's talking about doing all of this kind of sort of mythbustery type crafting and creating stuff, but not really. It's just it definitely feels like he went through the most brand safe, the most popular videos of the past 5 years that really appeal to little kids, and he is just kind of, I can't call it anything other than selling out. It feels like he totally sold out at the first drop of success, and I can't really blame somebody because it's not like his channel was going to be particularly successful. I wouldn't be surprised if this was the plan all along. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a production company working with him. But it is just like this massive pivot. It's a massive pivot that is day one trying to get little kids to buy stem monthly boxes. It's so sleazy for YouTube, and yet that's oddly exactly what that is exactly what, like, what Susan Wojcicki and YouTube wants. Is it wants people to sell out completely. So without showing his full thing, let's just see, he's got like, he has one of the American Gladiators actually in his video, Nitro. He's got a cannonball thing he's showing off. He's got this giant facility. He's got this pneumatic fireman pole. He's got all these Nerf guns. Like, as far as I know, he's never done anything with Nerf guns. He's never done anything building anything. Just look at how giant this facility is to start with. It's like there's almost certainly millions of dollars in this. He's got this googly-eyed player piano. I'm not sure he's ever worked on that. It's possible that some of these projects are from like 5 or 6 years ago, and he just didn't. He's just now doing it. Like, everything here, that furniture is just like the cheap, weird Chinese furniture that gets a lot of SEO. A crane game is SEO. The retro arcade is an SEO thing. There's just like everything in here possible. It's literally spaghetti on the wall. And then major self advertisement in the middle of it. It really is just like high level of pivoting, which, yeah, at a certain point also, I guess, if I had one successful YouTube video and a production company gave me millions of dollars to create a lab and do something really big, and I got sold on these ideas, it would be hard to say no, this is selling out, but it is so selling out. And personally, I think YouTube should just be indie. Like maybe this is probably the closest thing to, I'm sure, how a lot of people felt about indie bands selling out and signing with big companies. He's like partnering with Mr. Beast also. But yeah, that it is so sellout, and certainly that doesn't as far as Susan Wojcicki, like showing that, it's like that they're even kind of trying to balance it out by saying, well, this beauty guy still bleaches his hair, and this fashion guy still does it. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't really inspire the thought that you can be a small indie content creator and succeed on YouTube. If every single person that gets a shout out from Susan Wojcicki either has to be incredibly lucky and successful first and foremost, or they have to sell out. There are definitely a lot of YouTube channels from creators and makers who make one thing every 6 months, one thing every year. It's an incredibly slow process to do something good and have it actually work. And those kinds of content creators have been severely punished by the algorithm because they don't make enough content fast enough. So yeah, it sucks. It doesn't feel like a good announcement, and that's pretty much every announcement from Susan Wojcicki. And I think that's how most YouTubers feel, or most small YouTubers feel, is that every time she announces something, it is like procedurally generated and committee approved to demoralize as many small content creators as possible. Because you can't compete with Crunch Labs. You definitely can't. Even tested.com, which is Adam Savage, one of the Mythbusters, original Mythbusters, like, even he does not have a facility that is big as Crunch Labs, and his videos do not look as polished or as well designed as Crunch Labs does. And that's kind of ridiculous. And tested.com, on a separate note, originally it was Jamie and Adam Savage, and Jamie barely did anything. He was just not comfortable in front of the camera. I don't think he ever was in the first place. But Tested has never been able to really find his footing as being a connected, concise, interesting channels since Adam and Jamie took over, effectively claimed the channel as their own. It has very much become a remote work, everybody is just Skyping in channel, and that makes it very disconnected and weird. It makes sense for video game journalists to Skype in and have a podcast. It really doesn't make sense for people who are either building or buying and testing gadgets to Skype in, because you would expect there to be a lab of some sort, and there just isn't really a lab in Tested. Yeah, it's been, frankly, years since I've watched anything on Tested, and I think I may have actually actively... We have a level 5 Dark Dragon. Nope. Yeah, I think I may have actively unsubscribed from Tested.com relatively recently, just by how much that is not really... I have just not watched it. In fact, there's probably quite a few YouTube channels that I have opted to... I should opt to unsubscribe from, because it's just been long enough in which I haven't followed them. Where there are also some other maker channels, certainly, like one of them that I was subscribed to that I didn't even remember I was subscribed to came out with a new video, and I'm like, oh, okay. And frankly, all the video is to say that there was a part shortage, and because there's a part shortage, there's nothing really he can do as far as his project. Yeah, the guy is working on a smart watch, a self-programmable smartwatch, and he used the sharp memory instead of like e-paper, and that made a nice looking screen that has run on the tiny battery for 17 days, so that's impressive. I want to make a smartwatch that would also act as a security key or password holder, and with the new FIDO 2 alliance expanding, FIDO being something that Windows and Apple and Google are all supposedly going to support, making a smartwatch that acts as a authenticating device for passwords using FIDO may be the move forward, but it may also be a case where there will still be a lot of websites that require you to type in a password, so having a password manager still probably will be necessary. It's all well and good if you can unlock your cell phones and your MacBooks and your iOS devices and your Windows devices with a security key, but if you can't go to then a website and log into a bank because the bank technology hasn't been improved, then that is a problem. And there's definitely far too many websites that have pretty poor security, often for like government sites and for other uses that should be a lot more secure. Anyways, we're here to talk about video games. The demo is out for Lego Brick Tales. I'll go ahead and put this on the fall list. It's planned to be released in 2022. This is another take or an attempt at making something that's maybe a little bit more Lego-y and less just TT game style, where the TT games look like Lego but actually have no brick assembly sections like this at all. The TT games are more about breaking things made out of Lego and collecting the studs as a currency. And I think Lego would like to have games that are more focused around instead building things with Lego. This could be 1,000 instead of 1,200. I don't know if there's real reason to do that. I think what we'll do is instead just attack here, and then attack here, and then go to this, and then special summon this. What I want to do is see if I can don't want to activate that ability. Not sure which one I want to add to my hand, but I'll take this. And then we'll see if we can special summon 2. Okay. I think the idea here is to probably just continuously link summon things and get that higher and higher. Let's see. We have a GameDeveloper.com article from Wednesday that I didn't bother talking about. 343 Industry has apologized for an offensive Juneteenth color palette. The president Bonnie Ross and Halo Infinite head of creative Joseph Staten have apologized for the inclusion of an offensively named color palette in the game. What was the offensively named color palette? Juneteenth is kind of a holiday that's fairly new, around the point in which slavery effectively ended in the South and Texas, because while slavery was ended earlier, the ward was not brought down and told to slaves, and obviously the slave owners weren't gonna tell them, and it was probably kept secret, actively tried to keep secret. Yeah, it's a recently federally recognized holiday commemorating the emancipation of enslaved African Americans. And somehow they had the new color palette labeled bonobo, which bonobo is a type of ape, and any even close connection between talking about apes and African Americans is, I think, quite rightly taken as racists. I don't see how you do that at all. Best case scenario, you assume that maybe bonobo is this bright red color, and they were jokingly saying that the color palette was bright red, like the bonobos behind is bright red. Well, almost certainly somebody should have seen that coming. And if anything, without getting too deep into how ridiculous the slacktivist SJWs are, you would think hiring and having so many SJWs on staff would have somebody recognize that and say, you know what, this is something that is going to get us flack. There's no way that should have gone unnoticed. Do this actually see how this works. Seriously? Well, that seemed to work. Yep. I can't help but cynically think that SJWs are too busy complaining about video game characters being too feminine looking, which is a continuous theme, or they're too busy complaining about the alleged toxic player base in Call of Duty, that when there is something internal, and when there is something that they don't want to complain about for one reason or another, they just let it completely slide and go unnoticed, or don't raise the alarm there. Or it could be a case that, in this case, the alarm was raised and they were just ignored, which might also speak to a certain lack of credibility that SJWs have, even employees or SJWs. A long time ago, I'll make it as a comparison here, I was playing around with making a, like, MySQL, back in the day when you would use MySQL, database of potential bad usernames if you're going to make a website with characters with people that had usernames, and derivatives of bad usernames, just kind of like how hard that would be. And it's fairly easy to have to get a list of bad words, bad usernames. They should at the very least send a warning. Now, programming in the name of a color palette into your own game probably would not immediately have you thinking about going through that list. It also almost certainly is a case that there is very few people of color, African Americans in particular, at 343 Industries, because if there was any African American in a position of power that was included in these decisions or these meetings, they would have said something. It also implies there aren't that many African Americans even as QA testers, because they should have gotten that message at that point too. It really seems like they've just stepped in it by being a little too, by actually being not diverse enough. And that's certainly an example of where real diversity in the workplace is a diversity of opinion, diversity of understanding and culture, as much as it is just a diversity in things that you were born with or things that you cannot change. And so if a company is just cynically hiring a African American woman for a diversity quota hire, but she turns out to have been a millionaire's daughter, and she was raised in the richest, most exclusive schools, she's not going to have probably even heard insults that a poor person has heard, a poor African American woman would have heard. Like, her life experience is going to be very atypical from what the average African life experience is. And certainly, calling anybody a monkey is not acceptable. I could see kids doing it. Kids do a lot of unacceptable things, certainly, but let's see. This might work fairly well. Don't chain this with anything. You bring this here up. Then do a fusion summon here to bring this to the field. Okay. You can target one monster you control and one your opponent controls, destroy them. We don't need to do that. Feels like I cannot attack. Why can I not attack? Oh. Find something to special summon, I guess. My macro wasn't working particularly well today, so we're gonna have to just jump all around. Here we have a game on Steam that's just kind of a blocky dungeon crawler of no interest. Here we have Mask of Deception, which looks like it's kind of a low quality horror game. Here we have Lux X Legacy, which looks like it's a shoot 'em up game. I have been playing Chariot and have had my new video card in for a couple days now with no potential problems. Although Windows now wants to update, and and I wouldn't be surprised if in Windows updating and Nvidia's video card driving updating have some kind of weirdness happening there, but I hope not. And of course my network issue is my ISP, I think. I'm fairly certain. But everything does seem to be working, and I am definitely just like one I am definitely one step closer towards feeling safe that my computer is back in business and not gonna have any real problems. That being said, I still need to buy faster RAM, new RAM. I want to do that, and that's going to be like $300. Maybe I can get it down to $150. And everything is just getting more expensive, and other things need to be purchased too. The stock market's in a bear market for what little that probably affects most people, and the housing market is sky high. Yeah, and the only way the average person could benefit from the housing prices being sky high is if they had somewhere else to go and rent was somehow really low. Like if you had a spare house, now would be the time to sell that spare house, certainly. But if most people don't have spare houses, and moving in to rent someplace is not cheaper, and frankly, moving in general is probably a nightmare as far as just how expensive it would be to do everything, how expensive it would be to pay movers at the moment. They just approved a childhood dose for COVID. I don't know why I'm talking about any of this really, but so there probably will be a whole new anti-vax movement and fight around schools slowly deciding that either this year or next year that they're going to require their kids to be vaccinated, and parents who are going to absolutely not want that to be the case. Let's see. Let's Just end the turn there. Yeah, I'm probably... Yeah, I started a little late today, and yet I don't feel like that really helped me be more awake and more alert. So, I still feel a little awkward. I still feel a little laid back and just lackadaisical, I guess might be the word to use. And I really need to be burning through games like Bored here on Steam, which looks like it's just Go, or a very similar minimalistic puzzle game to Othello or Go. Not interesting enough for me. Here we have a pixely game called I Am Number One, which looks bad. Here we have Pedro Land DX, which doesn't look visually polished, and effectively this is just Mario in a sombrero. I almost want to give this a chance, but I bet nobody ever plays this game or cares about it. Like, I guess the question is, how close can you get to depicting something that looks like Mario and not get sued by Nintendo, which is incredibly sue happy. And since they know you can only have like one of each card, doing the same trick twice is pretty much impossible. Let's see, we have a game here called La Vanchi du Desert, which looks like it's a resource management game, not particularly polished. Here we have a Chinese word game, it looks like. A lot of text. We haven't been seeing too many really heavy text games from China lately. There's something to, I guess, applaud around that, maybe. Here we have a game called Tales of Fire, which looks like it's probably too simplistic. Yeah, I don't think that there's enough of a game there. And we can activate this. We can target this. Here we have a game on Steam called Shadowgate VR, The Mines of Mythrock, which I feel like I've recognized a Shadowgate game. I don't know if Shadowgate's particularly good though. So instead of making actual decisions there, I'll just put that on the follow list. Here we have something that's called Soul. Looks like one of those horror RPG Maker games. There's probably nothing here. Chinese, Korean, Japanese, and English. Yeah. I heavily suspect that there isn't a lot to there. Let's see. Best case scenario would be to put this on the field and then see if we can link material with it. Okay. See what happens here. Yeah, I think I'd be exceedingly generous to put Soul on the fall list. Just too generous. I think I have to say no to that. There aren't actually even that many games out today, it looks like. Unless they're all over the place, which they might be. Sokolar here is a board game that might have something to it, so I'll give it a follow. Wasn't signed in originally, so I'm having to reload. Try this. Destroy himself, I guess. Do special something else, I guess. So triggers that. Try this. Activate this effect. Trying everything possible, even though none of it's probably gonna work. Yeah, unless this activates an effect that would have potentially done damage through a defensive person. That would have been the only way I could have won there, I think. Here we have a Chinese game that's a scantily clad, poorly animated character. I wouldn't even really call her an anime girl, and that seems to be about the only screen, and it's just the background to what looks like a text-based game, Chinese only. Yep. I heard an interesting thing, and I'm confused about it a little bit. Apparently, porn is maybe highly limited and not allowed in Korea, which makes Destiny Child as a Korean game feel very odd since it is a lewd game. I guess maybe it's just not explicitly pornographic, or however they define that. So yeah, certainly could explain a few things as to why it sticks to being just lewd instead of just pure nudity. But it also makes Destiny Child as an adult mobile game stand out compared to a lot of other ones that are just, alright, this is going to straight up have nudity in it, but then it's going to be full of microtransactions and really not a good game. Here we have what looks like yet another game that is a Witness clone. You can even see in the trailer from the behind the Witness, and then the ads that was not from the, like, honestly, that's probably even having a single frame that says from the mind behind the Witness is potentially something that could get you in trouble with the law. It definitely feels like this is inspired by the Witness, but it's also going to go in different directions. We may start to see that there is just ways now somehow to asset flip games to make them look like the Witness. This is the game called The Looker. Honestly, it feels like it might very well just be straight up a parody of the Witness. Now, I would say the Witness is kind of a great example of being first to market. Let's try a different deck while we're at it. Because the Witness, people knew was in development. Like, he had shown people at Giant Bomb years before what he was working on in kind of closed NDA'd meetings. So maybe that didn't leak out enough that anybody could have beaten him to market. But even from the point that the Witness launched and now, you're talking 2-3 years behind minimum, if not 4 or 5 years behind. So nobody really rushed to clone the Witness. If anything, the Witness was a such a triumph at making a different type of 3D world puzzle event game that it raised the bar and probably scared away several people who might have thought about making puzzle games. But yeah, there really hasn't been any AAA attempt to compete against it. There's been no increased desire to make puzzle games because I don't think the Witness particularly sold well. The Witness also was severely overpriced and still is to this day severely overpriced, which I think limited the amount of people that actually wanted to play the game or play the game all the way through. I don't know if game developers really have a moral obligation to try and make the game industry itself better. You would think or hope that they would feel that obligation, but also if it's totally believable that some of them will just make their game, sell their game, and not care that nobody else ever tries to compete with it, or that it didn't increase the field as far as who could play in it. The NFL, and this may be a bad comparison, but the NFL doesn't try to add more teams or care about what the XFL does or add competition to the types of American football you can watch. They just get their NFL advertising money and licensing fees and call it a day. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Animal Sanctuary, which seems like it is a animal sanctuary simulator. It's family friendly, and for that reason I think I'll put it on the follow list, but outside of that reason I would almost certainly just dismiss it. Definitely feels like it might just be a mobile phone port, but not particularly a terrible mobile phone port. We got another disconnect there, and we'll take that advantage. If we could get up to 5,000 today, that would be excellent. If we could get up all the way to 22,000 today, that would be amazing. I don't think we're going to get that far, though. Here we have a game called Pain, which looks like it's a ball bouncing platforming game. This definitely feels like it would play better than the game Chariot that I'm playing. Yeah. When I think about how Jump King became so popular, yeah, I'm going to say no to Pain. As a game that really just has you jumping. The only reason I feel like Jump King is popular is because streamers can make reaction videos around it. But even at that, I feel like Jump King probably is a better experience that you would have than Chariot. Chariot is oddly this escort quest for the entirety of the game. It seems like it's going to be around pushing a chariot around and struggling to get a chariot to move while not really having a run button and having floating jumps and just slow movement in general. And in all fairness, I would never play a game like Jump King. I can see it for what it is, and I probably should have seen Chariot for what it is and said no to that. Definitely Chariot is one of those games that the old Giant Bomb convinced me was a game I wanted to play. And I probably have quite a few games on my Steam account that are things that I was convinced I wanted to play in the old days. From old Giant Bomb in particular being a heavy influencer of me in the old days. But now in retrospect, I probably don't have that much interest in playing those kinds of games, or never really should have had any interest in playing those kinds of games. And Giant Bomb is always in the old days and before, they always did their quick looks, and the quick looks are effectively just an hour-long commercial to convince you to buy a game, and then they stop playing the games pretty much after the quick looks, and they don't go all the way through them. They don't even hit the 2-hour mark, I think, a lot of times on a lot of games they play. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called The Hotel. Looks like a psychological horror of no real interest. If you're going to make a game called The Hotel, you almost would assume that it would be from The Shining, but yeah, I don't see any reference to The Shining here, and visuals do not look good enough, and that's saying a lot, frankly, because most horror video games are fairly visually polished now. This looks like this is some kind of online role-playing game in a bar. Bargue. I guess you're arguing with people in a bar. I guess that's the idea. Okay. I'm going to hold this on the field. I'm going to put this on the field. Then I'm just going to go into attack mode. The lava golem doing 1,000 damage to you by giving you a monster with 3,000 attack is not particularly a great card to play. Here we have a game on Steam called Pearphone.io, which looks like garbage. Here we have a Big Fish Games Hidden Object game, which I'm not going to buy any more of those. I think my mouse, after I took the stickers off the bottom of them, I think it's running fine. I haven't felt any like hitching or anything like that on the mouse. Nor have I seen any hitching otherwise on my computer, so I do think the mouse problem was a separate problem. Let's go ahead and activate this ability and cancel this monster, this Time Lord character. Attack here. Attack here. Come over here. Activate this effect. Summon out some scapegoats. Well, this may have screwed me. That's probably enough with this ability to defeat me. So I probably should be more cautious if somebody summons Lava Golem and just assume that they have a better strategy and destroy it very quickly. If you're going through these festivals and you're just going to lose a lot, though, you are going to also run into a problem of not getting enough of the festival points quickly enough. Here we have a game called Hen, Chicks, and Cat, which is a box pushing Sokoban game. Visually, the polish is alright, but maybe a little too complicated for the visuals. Too much variety in trees, perhaps. Overall, though, it doesn't grab my attention. I don't know if there's really any Sokoban game I'd really want to play. Here we have Solsta, Crown of the Magister, which doesn't want to load. Let's see. What could this summon? That? I don't see a reason to summon that. Let's see if the videos are... It looks like it's a strategy placement RPG game. It's rated very positively, but it's not something that actually interests me. It must have come out of early access because it's already on the falling list, and I guess I'll just leave it there. Although I could probably just make a decision now to remove it from the fall list. Come to think of it, yeah. This definitely does not seem like it is gonna cut the mustard, as it were. Okay. Zero attack from anywhere in the field. It would be zero defense. in both cases. Okay. If you activate this effect, that can get on the field. Then we can tribute, I guess, those two items. And that only worked because I got fairly lucky. And apparently... there's no face-up field spell on the destroy this card. Okay. Whoops. Well, that definitely screams a fairly complicated strategy to play those character cards. Let's see, we have a game on Steam here called Solar Panic Utter Distress, which I think is probably a joke game. I don't really like this animation style. It almost comes off like they're trying to do their own South Park type thing. Honestly, I don't really like South Park's animation style, and I feel like there is potentially room for doing the exact same voice acting and jokes of South Park and then remastering the graphics to look more like a regular video game, or more like a regular animated series. I don't know if that's ever actually worked. There are definitely things like Sailor Moon Crystal that modernizes 30 plus years of the old animation style of Sailor Moon, and that slightly changes the animation style, but it's also not really the it's not the same story or voice acting. And honestly, I guess if South Park started re-releasing episodes, it probably would end up getting controversies for a second time that they wouldn't bother wanting to do. Looks like my network finally decided to reset. Back to video games. We have a video game on Steam here called Sol Dorado Heist, which is a visual novel, but it might have something interesting. At the very least, you don't have games around casino heists. You don't have a Spanish, Latin America, English languages that often. So I'll leave this on the following list, I guess. I feel like this was announced. Yeah, this came out April 23rd, 2021. So we may actually be looking at some follow list games that need to be cleaned up. So do I want to leave this on the follow list? Then I guess would be the question. I don't think it has to go. If it has only 2 user reviews, honestly, it's just like this girl in this costume is the only thing that's even keeping my attention. Yeah, I think it has to go. At a certain level, visual novels may just be somewhat dying on Steam, and it's been a while since anybody has even tried to make the complaint about there being too many visual novels being released on Steam. It's just not happening as much. Is that because there's a lot of NDA'd non-disclosure or censorship happening with Valve and Steam and visual novel creators, and they're saying we won't publish your game? Or is it that visual novels have just kind of fallen out of favor and not that many new ones have been announced or come out in the past couple of years? That might also be the case. It's not like I'm seeing a ton of visual novels in the past couple of months announced on Gamatsu. It may be that they are moving visual novels to mobile games, or a lot of companies that would have made visual novels have gone out of business or just moved on to making different kinds of games. I wouldn't be surprised if 50-60% of all of the people who would have made cheap visual novels have moved on to making cheap free-to-play games, because the elements in a visual novel and a cheap free-to-play game, the story is basically the same, and the way it's displayed is basically the same. Moving on, we have a game here called Soul 705 from 2020, which looks like it's a point-and-click game, but we can see it's mixed and not relevant, so that can leave the follow list. I wouldn't be surprised if I ran the follow list multiple times. SoCat, a Sokoban box pushing game from 2020. It's 100% positive, but it's not relevant, so I'll leave that one on the follow list. Soccer Cup. Here, Solitaire. If that is on the follow list, I don't know why it would be. Even if I was really interested in doing a soccer game, playing a soccer solitaire game doesn't make the most sense, particularly one that only has one review. Yeah, I think I'm fairly doomed here. So at some point, if I had two monsters on the field, I could have summoned one here to be a 0 attack, and then 2 with 0 attack would have let me special summon that. Here we have a game on Steam called So Long as There Is Mercy, which looks like it might have been an interesting point and click, but again, it's mixed. It's also free, so I suppose just check it out if you're interested. It might even be a student project, but I don't see any real evidence of that. But no reason to keep that on the follow list. I should hold things to higher standards. So you have a game like this, which is a snow speeder game that actually looks really good, and yet it has no reviews, which maybe means nobody even cares about playing a snow speeder game, which may very well be the case. Like, there really isn't that much interest in motorcycle games either, as far as video games. So yeah, let's take that off the follow list too. At some point in the future, I may have too small of a follow list, but it's not super likely that that will happen. There's always going to be new games that I'll want to consider for a while. And if anything, that would just eventually save me time as far as cleaning up follow list games. This Devil's Chosen is a new game, which is a card battler game. Probably wouldn't be anything, but I'll give it a follow, just because I'm always looking for a CCG. Train Ride Simulator doesn't look like anything of interest. Final Vendetta here is a Final Fight clone beat 'em up game. Not from the creators of Final Fight, and it's already on the follow list, so we'll leave it there. finding things on the follow list either means that all the tabs are out of order, which they are, or that I've seen more games before their point in which they leave early access or get officially launched according to what's on Steam.com. Here we have a game called Panda Parkour, which is just an infinite runner. So we can say no to that. That's one of the things about like Chariot, is that honestly it probably should have been a mobile game if it had been released now instead of in 2014. Since there's really no dialogue and really no game there. This is a multiplayer game, a multiplayer focused game, 3D cooperative multiplayer game. We play as a blacksmith. Doesn't quite feel like there's enough game there for that to be interesting. They're doing quite a lot over here on Yu-Gi-Oh! Let's see, Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate has been listed on Steam. And on top of that, I think I can go ahead and just put this on the wish list. Like, there's definitely a lot of relevancy around Final Fantasy VII Remake in particular. Maybe there's an argument that you still need to play Final Fantasy VII, the original version first. But unless you're going to try to make an argument that none of the Final Fantasies matter, or Final Fantasy VII in particular doesn't matter, the remake matters. Integrate, I think, is the latest kind of updated patch of it. I think. I don't think it is. I don't think that there's two Final Fantasy remake versions that you need to own at the moment, but there will be at some point. What's interesting is I just got an achievement from Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Master, and honestly I thought the only achievement left for me to collect was to get to like platinum. Here we have a game on Steam called Your Computer May Be at Risk, which just looks like it's kind of a adventure puzzle game. And I'll be really generous and put it on the fall list, but almost certainly I shouldn't. Here we have a game called Life on the Edge, which looks like it's an asteroids game or a game of life. It's a tower defense game around COVID-19. I don't think anybody cares about playing a game like that, regardless of how you feel about COVID-19. We have a game called Lean, which doesn't look like anything of interest. Here we have a game called Bocce Time VR. This is the first time I've ever seen Bocce Ball as a game covered. Although, what they're really considering Bocce Ball here is a little inaccurate from what real Bocce Ball is. And very few people play Bocce Ball too. Just old Jewish men in New York are the only people I've ever heard of that actually play Bocce Ball. And I probably wouldn't even know what it is if I didn't actively try to understand and know what most games are and try and investigate games. It's not a terrible game, certainly, to try to translate to VR, though. Standing in one place and throwing balls, virtual balls. it's not, it's a more complicated version of something like horseshoes or washers. But yeah, I'll put it on the follow list as a VR game. It's still years later, have yet to find any real evidence that VR is worth getting into. Moving on, we have Brave Builder Constructor Climb, which just looks like a frustration platformer. Perhaps with the gimmick that you have to build the walls that you're going to jump on. Regardless, that's not enough of a change to make me want to play this. Here we have a generic racing game called Mini Race, which we can say no to. Here we have a dog slide puzzle, square puzzle, not really a slide puzzle. Video instead of stationary images, which is slightly interesting, but not really changing much. Here we have a game called Plunder Dungeons, which, yeah, I don't think there's anything here that particularly looks interesting. Here we have a game called Lost Snowman, which looks like it might be a Three Vikings clone. Is probably the comparison there. Instead of Lost Vikings, I don't remember if the name of the game was Lost Vikings or Three Vikings, but right, so is there a way we could make a 0? Is this a dark reptile? No, it isn't. So I can't do anything. Select a card to destroy. 1200, 1300. That didn't destroy it. Let's see. We have a prologue for a game called Monsters Showdown on Steam if you want to look at a demo. We have a game here called Blitz in the Paper Kingdom that doesn't look interesting. Let's see. Alright, well, let's start with this one. Try and destroy this one. Try and destroy this one. And then we'll activate this one. And we'll destroy this. We'll try and destroy this one. And then this one. Hardly gonna save the day, though. Come on, Dark Hole. Nope, lost. Here we have a game on Steam called A Rich Taste of Ecchi, which would be lewd, probably anime images. What's odd is it's tagged as an RPG and a visual novel when clearly this is just a jigsaw puzzle game of no real quality. If anything, I'd say these images probably are suspect as to whether they even bothered to officially properly license them or whether they just got them off the internet. Here we have a game called Hot Speed, which may be a racing game, but also seems to heavily emphasize the real-world 3D model Chinese gimmick that we haven't seen in a very long time, really, of let's have a 3D model and let's have them tied up for kind of no reason, and let's have them kind of scantily clad so you can see their stockings, their underwear. Of course, this one is claiming to have sexual content and nudity as a Chinese game. I question if that's actually true or if they just are abusing the tag system. The tag system does seem to be still fairly rife for abuse as far as just completely mislabeling it. I don't think this deck is for me. I think this deck is probably the best one to stick to. Here we have a game that I have no idea what these are supposed to be. Looks like Persian or Indian language. Looks like it's just an RPG Maker game, but obviously English is not supported. Thai. Yes, Thai. That makes sense. We don't have a lot of Thai games, so I've maybe seen 3 or 4 in total. Here we have Suki ni Yorisou Otome no Sahou, which is apparently a word game, visual novel, anime game that probably doesn't support English, but looking at the quality of the animation, I would lean towards thinking that this is actually a Japanese visual novel. You're seeing a lot of characters, you're not seeing any emphasis on showing text. Yes, Japanese full audio and Chinese subtitles. But one single visual novel in the past couple of weeks is more the exception that proves the rule than it would be a evidence that we're going to see a lot of visual novels. Let's see. And frankly, when we were seeing visual novels, they were usually supporting English subtitles. We have a game called Chords Enchanter, which may be some kind of educational music game. I'd like it to actually be educational and good. It doesn't really look that good. Kind of feels like you're just gonna pick one symbol and drag it in place based on what you're looking for. But I'll give it a follow list just out of hope. Here we have another puzzle game. Still seeing a lot of them. Still seeing a lot of puzzle games. Here we have a game called Hidden Desert War, top-down 3D, which is an awful name and pretty bad-looking game. And then we have Lost Alone, Episode 3, Noanina, which doesn't look like a particularly great horror game. I almost wonder if Lost Alone series has caught my attention before. Well, looking at this, their website, they have a Lost Alone Episode 3 Granny. So Nonina may be a Spanish version of this. And this is being developed by a company called Danielle Doesn't Matter, which seems like it might very well be a active attempt to insult somebody. Yeah, each of the episode titles and the thumbnails are in different languages. Interesting. And in a weird way, this Lost Alone Sorelina is actually rated fairly possible. But the actual game here probably does just feel like asset flips. This came out December 21st, 2021. Let's see what number 2. Episode 2 is 100% positive from May 16th, 2022. Still really is asset flips. What it kind of comes off as is it feels like they're somewhat trying to actually make a horror game and they just don't have the funding or the skill to actually make one. And I think it feels slightly more like diminishing returns than improving. So yeah, I could have left it on the fall list, but I think it is just better to remove it from the fall list. Let's see, we've got some GameDeveloper.com articles here. Unpacking Road 96 and The Valve are among the 2022 Games for Change Award finalists. The Games for Change Awards are effectively nothing. I have to say, it's just like they're not presented at the Summer Games Fest. They're not presented at a Microsoft presentation or a Sony presentation. Sony probably would be the best company to adopt somewhat kind of awards ceremony and have it run in air either right before or right after their announcements, just to give them more to talk about and more to focus on, and more to have to say, really. There's a whole list here of games, and I'll just quickly scroll through them. Just say I pretty much don't recognize any of them. I think Road 96 I've seen a trailer for, maybe, and that's about it. The rest of these I've never even heard of. At a certain level, video games for change does not really make sense. Video games are for entertainment and only entertainment. Like I seriously don't think there's anything else that you could do with them. Rapid trigger. Probably not the best way to fusion summon something. Rapid trigger is a quick play spell. I think that's the benefit of having that. I don't think there's a benefit for doing any of that. And I think you're relatively safe to just attack. Let's see what he does. His ability. Okay. Now this attack position. So activate this quickly. I don't think I can target one face-up card and use the fusion material. We just put this up face-up defense position. Yeah, no reason to activate that ability. GameDeveloper.com says Activision Blizzard execs never knowingly tolerated harassment, says Activision Blizzard. The full quote here is, "There's no evidence to suggest that Activision Blizzard senior executives ever intentionally ignored or attempted to downplay ... instances of gender harassment," which is not going to really satisfy anybody and is pretty much expected. That is certainly, like, if you actually cared to look to be believed or look like you were actually trying, you would have had an independent third-party review. Even in that case, there's still probably a bias and leaning towards a independent third-party review company siding with Activision Blizzard. This is definitely one of those cases where there is smoke, there probably is fire, and there's just been way too much smoke at Activision Blizzard for people to really go, oh, that all is done and everything is solved. I'm sure Microsoft isn't inherently happy with them claiming they didn't do anything wrong either, because it's just kicking the football to the point when they acquire Activision Blizzard, and then they're going to have to start cleaning house. And it probably would be easier for Microsoft just to fire all of the management at Activision Blizzard. Just completely clean house and keep only the associate level people. And there still definitely are potentially associate levels that were also bad actors acting inappropriately, that you would still need to have people investigated. Pretty much, I think, for Activision Blizzard, if I was the person in charge and I was at Microsoft acquiring them, I would have every single employee have to re-interview for their current job. Maybe even promote some people, probably demote some people, definitely fire some people. But yeah, for PR, doing an internal investigative review is saying the moment you said, well, we're going to investigate this internally, was the point where most people rolled their eyes and said, oh, so you already know for a fact that you're guilty and this is just a cover-up. That is certainly the way conspiracy-minded people are going to, and cynical people are going to see it. And I think there's a lot more cynics these days, probably rightfully so, when it comes to Activision Blizzard or just companies in general than there used to be. Which certainly sucks if you're innocent, because if you are innocent, completely innocent, you then have to have this third-party review company that still runs the risk of coming back and saying you're not innocent. Moving on, though. GameDeveloper.com says Discord has introduced automod tools to make it safeguarding communities easier. Automod is described as a mod team helper by the company. Yeah, I did make a Discord a long time ago. I don't think I even linked to it, though, and I don't think anybody's ever gotten on it. There definitely are things that, as a YouTube content creator, theoretically, if I got big enough, if I had enough of a fandom, if enough people really wanted to chat and have that fervor, I would encourage that and try to engage with it, although arguably I probably wouldn't engage with it that much. But yeah, as starting off, it's not really worth it to do a lot of that stuff, or try to do a lot of that stuff. And I don't even really think I would need that big of a fandom. If there was even like a steady stream of 5 people that wanted to be on Discord talking to the other 5 people, Discord makes it so easy to do something like that. It's reasonable. But also, YouTube heavily pushes everything into its own chat system, which is not good, instead of linking to a separate forum. Okay. Go ahead and set a trap. And guess this is the only one really worth doing. Something that it's not worth it. Let's see, GameDeveloper.com says over half of game developers are reportedly being underpaid. A new survey from Uni Global Union indicates that low pay and excessive hours are driving interest into unionization among game developers. Honestly, it should have been something that they pushed for a lot earlier. Although this is kind of a self-reporting poll, basically they're saying here that 66% of people who responded feel like they're getting low pay, and that they're getting excessive work and inadequate benefits. Lack of access and training or software, oddly higher than even lack of job security. And the least of the categories being shown that people are concerned about is workplace discrimination and sexual harassment. And yet, GameDeveloper.com is notoriously known for talking about workplace discrimination and sexual harassment, and very rarely talks about low pay or excessive amount of work. And I don't think I've ever seen an article about inadequate benefits or lack of access to training or software. There is definitely a problem, however, with people just wanting more pay, because that's what management always feels like is the solution, is that, oh, we can just pay people more and then not actually meet people's needs. We can pay them a little bit more, but not enough to get them up to a reasonable wage. People do not understand that how expensive healthcare and life insurance and 401ks are, and it's not until they're screwed, it's not until they have a major health care issues or somebody dies and they should have had a retirement plan or life insurance, or somebody goes to retire. Companies love to screw their employees that way by not supporting people who you probably should be supporting, considering you are seeing them more than their families in many cases. Game developer goes on and says about half of women and non-binary respondents said they've experienced gender discrimination. It's believable, certainly. Like, there definitely isn't that many non-binary and female people in the video game industry. I've often suspected, though, that a lot of that has more to do with women and maybe even non-binary, but I think women in general are smarter than men, if I could make a generalization there. And I think they realize that working in the video game industry is a bad career, and they just self-select themselves to not be in the video game industry instead moving into just programming in general or IT in general. And yeah, you always have to. There really is no good way to weed out people who see discrimination around every corner when there really isn't. Non-white developers are more likely to say racial discrimination is an issue, which is potentially, again, something you might dismiss. Like, at a certain level, society is what all people in that society agree upon. So if all the white developers are saying we don't see racial discrimination, even when we are super woke and looking for it as much as possible, and then non-white people are saying we do see it, well, then you're at an impasse, and there's no reason to, there's no way to legitimately believe either side. You kind of have to just throw up your hands and go, well, we can't prove anything here. If half of the people on the planet said there is no moon, and half of the people on the planet said there is a moon, you can't. You either argue that out and make your arguments to determine whether there's a moon or not, or you resort to war at a certain point. And certainly you can use scientific evidence to perhaps prove that there's a moon a lot more than you can prove discrimination. These self-surveys are not as helpful as something like a report from the Equal Employment Commission, the EEOC, I believe it is, or EEC, like Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or Equal Opportunity Employment Commission. Yeah, EOEC maybe. And take note that websites like GameDeveloper.com, either because they're lazy and they don't want to be real journalists, or because they know that those kinds of reports, if they exist, don't back up the narrative, the propaganda they're pushing. They never go for like actual proven complaints by the EOC, or even settlements between lawsuits. Like, if we just ran the number of how many times video game companies have been sued and they've settled versus times that they've been sued and they've not settled and they've won, at least there'd be some level of success there. How many times have they gone to arbitration and has a company won? Each of those factors, each of those indicators, I think might paint a very different picture. And at a certain point, because GameDeveloper.com wants to push the narrative that all video game companies suck and always will suck, it's just a very negative narrative to push. It doesn't make game players happy. It doesn't make me want to go and play more games or play games at a different company. They never highlight a company that's doing a good job or anything like that. But it also makes it very hard to believe when this is all you're ever hearing. And certainly it's understandable where you have some people that at some point they just say, we don't care. Like, you've complained about it. These video game companies have complained about it. Video game developers and employees have complained about it. Between the two of those people, they've done nothing to really fix it. And then they come to the game players and make it like it's the game players' job to fix things or improve things, and it's really not. It's kind of like Apple using Chinese, effectively slave labor, to make iPhones. At a certain point, yes, it would be more moral to not buy iPhones because, you know, child labor and slave labor is being involved in the creation of that. But in reality, you have to have a phone. They're all being made in Chinese factories, pretty much. Nobody is doing it any better. No individual U.S. citizen can fly over to China and make any changes or affect any improvement at all. Best case scenario, you write a letter to a politician and then the politician ignores you as far as putting sanctions on China. So you just have to throw up your hands and go, I've got to have a phone. I've got to take phone calls for my job. I have to feed my family. You can't take the world's problems on your shoulders. Whether the problems really exist or not. Let's see, special summon. See if this works. Summon this. Special summon. This. Probably wasting my time here. Yep. See what activating this effect will do. So that's going to negate the activation. of the effect. Moving on, GameDeveloper.com has an article here. The Epic Games has rolled out a new crossplay tools for Steam and Epic Games Store. That pretty much isn't crossplay with any consoles at this point. And I would assume if there was going to be crossplay with consoles, it very possibly wouldn't use the Epic engine or the Epic Games Store software development kit and APIs. I wouldn't be surprised one bit if it is more of a case where games will use other APIs for crossplay. That again is a feature that really should have been available day one of the Epic Games Store. Crossplay built into the Unreal Engine is an intriguing idea, certainly, and something that probably a lot of game developers would like to have and game players would like to have, but just being able to play with the insignificantly small number of people who play games on the Epic Games Store on Steam isn't much of an improvement or much of an offering. Okay, I'll activate this. This will buy me a turn, maybe two. The EA CEO Andrew Wilson's annual pay had dropped by 20 million, although the bear market probably is dropping a lot of millionaires' pay, whether they're doing it at the top of the accounting line or it's just naturally happening in the shares they're getting as part of their pay. Last year's shareholders voted against a sizable pay increases for executives at the US publisher, which I guess that's probably a good thing. EA definitely is not a good company that deserves to be rewarding its CEOs for good actions. EA's been very bad at making games that weren't full of microtransactions, or games that are good in general. They've been very bad about making games at all. So the amount they were getting overpaid was pretty ridiculous. EA in particular, Activision Blizzard's Bobby Kotick in particular, getting overpaid. Of course, that's just one CEO at one company. The truth is, there needs to be a multiplier cap on how much the highest paid person at any business gets paid. $100 million, $1 million a year could be even the cap. Stock options perhaps could bump you up to 10 or 100 million on top of $1 million of actual cash. Or at the best case, if you wanted to be more hands-off with it, the CEO should only be getting paid maybe 100 times more than the lowest level employee. If a CEO had to say, don't hire anybody at minimum wage at $7-8 an hour because I don't want to get paid $800 an hour, I want to get paid more, at least that would be something he has to consider. Yep. At least that would be a thought that goes through their head. It would be fairly easy too to implement. Just pick a number, frankly, as a politician, and just say, look, you can only make this much, then we're going to tax you 100% after that much, or you can only make 100 times what your lowest employee makes, including people that are contractors, including people that are hired through third-party companies. Because certainly they would try to manipulate that, and there almost certainly would be loopholes that people would try. A lot of accounting crimes really should just be punished on the spirit of the law more than the letter of the law. Like, but rich people have rich lawyers. Activate Sanctuary of the Sky. Go ahead and give me this. See if this works. Moving on, Thirsty Suitors has won the 2022 Tribeca Games Awards. I forgot about this game even existing. Not a lot to say here, obviously. Thirsty Suitors being like this Indian girl dealing with her parents, trying to set her up and get her married off. Apparently, it's won an award while the game is still being developed, which is kind of pathetic, really. And the Tribeca Game Awards, again, and awards that don't really have any value. In a lot of ways, the Grammys adding a video game soundtrack category feels a lot like that too, where it's just not, nobody's gonna respect these awards, and nobody should respect these awards. And then a game called V Rising has hit 200 million sales in 1 month. It is questionable as to why GameDeveloper.com actually highlights articles like this, considering they barely talk about actual video games or the amount of sales in video games. If Gamatsu told me V Rising had hit 2 million sales in a month, I'd be like, alright, well, Gamatsu reports on almost everything, so that makes sense. But Game Developer doesn't. Here we have, I think, some more follow list, because I was running the macro over and over again. So Smoots Golf here. Doesn't look terrible, but isn't relevant, and the reviews don't look great. So I'm going to take that off the follow list. I'm going to have to reload any of these games. Smelter here was, I believe, kind of a Metroidvania game that caught my attention in particular because the girl is kind of in bikini in this trailer. Although it doesn't, it's so zoomed out, it kind of doesn't matter. This is mostly positive. It's not an early access. $19.99 is a pretty expensive game, but whatever. This actually may be more closer to a Mega Man game than a Metroid game. It's from Dingen Entertainment Publishing. Let's see what this does. Bring this back to the hand. 1,000. We'll check here. Let's see. Next we have a game called Smash Ball on follow list, which Yeah, I think we can take this off the follow list. It just doesn't look polished enough. Came out in February. Doesn't have any real response to it. Here we have a visual novel. It's rated positively. Slubbish Dragon Princess Love Plus from Sekai Project publisher, Whirlpool developer. I guess I can put that on the wishlist. Yeah, I suspect at this point there's enough visual novels in my wish list that if I was going to get deep into covering visual novels, I'd have more than enough. And I have said that I pretty much would only cover the top tier ones. So putting Slubbish Dragon Princess regular game in the wish list is kind of pointless, but I'll do it anyways. Notably, this game is also tagged with having sexual content and nudity, but the other version of the game, the newer version of the game, I would assume, didn't seem to have those tags. And so there is kind of this regressiveness that's happening as far as content creators not being allowed to make the kind of content they want to make, or consumers of their content on Steam not being allowed as much to consume the kind of content they want to consume. Okay, this is moving really, really slow. Probably should just start. It's been 2 hours. I probably should just focus on the news. Here we have a puzzle game, 4X game called Slipways. Which 4X games are definitely not my deal, but I'm gonna make an exception here on this one and put it on the wish list. It looks nicely polished. We can see it's well received. Here we have Slime Factory, which is just a clone of Slime Rancher, I believe is the name of the game. And yeah, it doesn't have any relevance, so it can leave the follow list. Sidetracked, minimalistic puzzle game. I will give it more time. Slice of the Sea. Feels like a point-and-click adventure game. It's rated very positively, so go ahead and put that on the follow list. Summon that. Does this guy have anything in the field? This is gonna take forever. 1400's not better. Though I guess I could have summoned the 1400 with this, then use Monster Reborn to summon something else. Yeah, put Slice of the Sea on the wish list. We have a game that's not out called Slender Threads that really shouldn't be on the follow list, but I'll leave it there. Looks like a maybe interesting point-and-click adventure game. We have what apparently is an early access VR game from January 2021 called Sleeper Cell, which, yeah, I have to just assume that this game is not going to ever be finished. We run into that problem quite a bit, where games just don't ever finish. Let's see. 2,700 is probably the right one. Distributing that and that. Let's see. Once per turn, you can banish one light fairy from your graveyard, then target one card in the field and destroy it. Activate it twice per turn if you have Sanctuary on the Sky. Okay, well, that kept that card on the field, but I don't think it helped them that much. We have a SNK Capcom, the match of the Millennium. Rated very positively here, so I guess if I am going to go deep into SNK versus Capcom fighting games, or fighting games in general, that should be on the wish list. Sniper Ghost Warrior 2 contracts is positively reviewed. Is this a single player game? Yes, it is. Yeah, I'm probably not very close to ever playing any of the sniper games, unless someone just gifted them to me, but I will put them on the wish list. I just don't have a lot of interest in it. Is the real reason. I could play them. I'm sure I'd enjoy them well enough, but I don't think I would have a ton of fun. Here we have a game called Sneaky Kitten, which I'd like to be relevant, but it's not. It came out December 2021, so I'll make an exception to leave that on the fall list. And hopefully that will be the last of the fall list news. Okay. Or fall list games. That didn't do anything. Yeah, I probably needed to put this on the field. We may be at a bit of a stalemate where I can attack this guy and he can attack this guy, but nope, it's not even a stalemate. It's straight up, I'm gonna lose. Alright, let's take a moment just to see how much progress we made. Not the greatest amount of progress for getting up to 22,000 points if we're only at 3,000 as far as rewards. This is gonna take a while, certainly. We do have a lot of milestones, however. As far as destroying cards in the exhibition, we did all of those. Dueling in the exhibition, we did all of those. Special summoning monsters in the exhibition, we did most of those. And normal summoning monsters in the exhibition, we did half of those. As far as daily quests, apparently picked up even some more daily quests and some logins since I started. We need to spectate, and we've made normal summoning monsters progress there, so that will in total give us 800 gems. Not really as much Well, it felt like I got more than 800 gems, really. So then that leaves me with just special summoning and normal summoning, which that'll be easy. Ranked duels need to be played. And then log in and spectate. Alright. And then we can go ahead and see that we've already jumped up 15 levels as far as rewards in the duel pass, so almost certainly no challenge there. Get all the way to the top. Why that ends up with giving us 28 rewards instead of 30, I don't know. Let's start spectating. And then let's start trying to burn through this news. So here's a Video Games Chronicles articles. Redfall story progress is tied to the host when the game is playing in co-op, which is weird because I thought they had said that the progress would work when you're playing co-op, but I guess maybe story progress. So character progress will carry over, mission progress will carry over potentially, but story progress won't. Maybe not even missions. Missions may be more like quests. At the end of the day, it doesn't really mean much to find that out, though. We still have no idea what Redfall really is or how it's going to play. Video Games Chronicles says Sony is reportedly planning to announce new hardware, including a PlayStation 5 Pro controller, which we'll have to wait and see what they actually announce. We already talked about the 343 Juneteenth cosmetic. Yeah, when you look at it here, Bonobo, I mean, it doesn't really come off as they're really emphasizing red for that to make sense. If anything, it seems like someone actively did this on purpose. And it's unfair, certainly in the case of 343, to say, oh, well, this might have been a third-party developer in some country where it's socially acceptable to be racist against black people, because it basically isn't socially acceptable anywhere to be racist against black people. Like, it has been in the past that Asian game developers have come off as being naively racist, but when you're straight up labeling something the name of a monkey, that there's active hate in there. Like, yeah. Or it feels like it, at least. It's hard. You can't ever prove anything, really. Moving on, Warzone Season 4 will improve visibility of the caldera by reducing vegetation, which feels like they're making the game less graphically demanding at the same time. Apparently, Amazon Prime is giving away 30 games on Prime Day, including Mass Effect Legendary Editions. Next month is Prime Day, apparently. Like, the Prime Day really has just jumped all over the place in the past couple of years. Resident Evil PC upgrades can now be reversed after overwhelming community response. DirectX 11 non-ray tracing versions of Resident Evil 2, 3, and 7 are now available. By default, Steam really should force old versions that have been pushed of games to specifically still include those old versions, or there should be a special submission and approval process for removing old versions. But to do it, you're going to have to basically, on the library, right click the game, go to properties, in a pop up menu, select betas, even though technically these wouldn't be betas. Uh, there's no password. You would then select the DirectX 11's underscore non RT, then click OK and close the pop up and let it auto update. Labeling it as a beta, though, is inaccurate, to say the least. One of the things I find frustrating about IT, and I think a lot of people in IT find frustrating, is almost certainly the idea of old versions of games have come up. Some IT person has said, well, why don't we have multiple versions, old versions of published ones available for people to pick and download? And somebody else above them, some manager, said no, because then that would cause more customer service complaints and more refunds, or that's just not something we care about or that we want to support. Particularly in Valve, that's exactly the problem, is that you really have to get the employees to all agree on something before anything gets done. And there just isn't technology minded or visionary leaders at the top of companies that otherwise this would have been so obvious that from day one Steam should have allowed the published versions, the already approved for release versions of games, to be downloaded. Maybe you put a pop-up warning, maybe you have it more obvious, but it just seems ridiculous. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says Naughty Dog has revealed how TES has been updated for the Last of Us Part 1 remake, which, whatever. The partner will get a glow up for the PS5 and PC versions. Whatever. I mean, arguably implying you're going to make the characters look better in a zombie apocalypse type world is kind of silly. But it is better graphics, is what they're saying. Amazon US is also offering 3 for the price of 2 on some of this year's biggest games, including Elden Ring and Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. Which, okay. Yeah, I saw that sale. June's free Prime games are Far Cry 4, Escape from Monkey Island, Astro Blaster, Across the Grooves, Calico, and World Rally Championship 8, FIA World Rally Championship. Those are separate free games. There was a Final Fantasy VII 25th anniversary. They announced a new Final Fantasy VII game. We'll talk about it, I'm sure. Console supplies could remain rocky through 2022, says the Xbox's CFO. Part shortages and logistical issues that continue to impact the supply chain. Video cards, though, now that like Bitcoin mining is really not a thing with video cards, are going to start to become a little bit more available and hopefully a little bit cheaper, which that's a little bit of a ray of hope. Although, if I have a 2070 right now and it's actually working, I don't need to buy a 3070 or 3080 as much as I might like that. If anything, I'm more leaning towards buying some like 2060s, some cheaper ones for non-gaming computers. Video Games Chronicle has the same article here that Activision Blizzard's internal investigations find they didn't ignore any harassment. Board also claims no harassment was withheld from the board as previously accused. Housemarque wants to put canned Returnal ideas into its next game. The mysterious original IP is still in its early stages. I'd assume pretty much every game developer wants to put ideas that didn't make it into their current game into their next game if they can make it fit. That would only make sense. Very rarely does somebody have an idea and then think it's so bad that they just would never use it at all. Final Fantasy VII Remake is coming to Steam this week, plus Square Enix confirms Steam Deck support. Steam Deck support for a kind of long-running JRPG like Final Fantasy VII Remake is definitely where the Steam Deck would shine. Of course, we're not really getting a lot of news about the Steam Deck, as there is not that many in the hands of people, and it's not going to probably be on shelves this Christmas, which is really what it needs to do. I could see Walmart. Like, Walmart has this whole game online that doesn't actually sell computers anymore, just sells accessories. They at one point tried to sell pre-built computers and they were really bad, but I could see Walmart just saying, hey, let's just go all in and be a partner, a seller slash stalker of the Steam Deck, and put it on their shelves as like a Walmart exclusive. Target, on the other hand, I've heard is very overstocked and they're gonna try and put everything on sale at the moment. Let's see. Capcom has officially announced Dragon's Dogma 2. This sequel is confirmed to have entered development following a leak last year. Which, okay. 10 years to make a sequel. Yeah, at what point, if you're waiting till the 10th anniversary, do you have to really admit that a sequel isn't really a sequel and it's more of a soft reboot, or just a cheap cash grab? Video Games Chronicle says Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 trailer confirms a trilogy. The second game will be called Rebirth and release next winter. I just see Rebirth is released the third game's name. They're confusing things here because Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion was is getting a remaster, and that was a PSP game. One assumes that Final Fantasy VII will go more and more off the rails in the sequel, and the third part of this trilogy of games will be fairly unconnected to the original events of Final Fantasy VII. I wouldn't be surprised if it really tries to wrap up the entire universe that Final Fantasy VII occurs in, and possibly even trying to interconnect some of the other Final Fantasy games that aren't that connected, like 13 and 15 and other games. There is an argument, frankly, to just straight up stop calling them Final Fantasy games in the remakes and make them their own separate series, because they're not really that connected. Moving on, a remaster of Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII is coming to consoles and PC. This is a PSP prequel, will be updated with HD graphics and new music. Okay. There might be characters in this PSP prequel that play a bigger role in the remake than, and that it might be kind of important to play Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII to get the full story. Pokemon Snap is the next Nintendo 64 game coming to Nintendo Switch Online, which that's pretty late to the party, considering the new Pokemon Snap has been out for several months, and as somebody who has played the new Pokemon Snap, I can tell you it is way, way better than the original Pokemon Snap. And there's very little reason why you would want to play the original Pokemon Snap unless you've just burned out and done everything in the new Pokemon Snap, which I haven't done. This boy character is grown up in the new Pokemon Snap, so it's a whole generation difference. And the graphics definitely look way better. Overwatch 2 has revealed a new seasonal structure, and it doesn't include loot boxes. The roadmap for the free-to-play game's first 2 seasons has been released. I would question how they're making money if they're not doing loot boxes. Maybe they're just hoping that cosmetics will sell enough. The Final Fantasy remake is currently $50 or £50, which I guess dollars and pounds are now the same equivalent rate at this point on Steam, and it will be $70 or £70 next month. Discount ends on July 7th, which is probably a decent deal to take if you plan on playing Final Fantasy VII in the next 2 years, I would say. Because I bet Square Enix does very little as far as deep discount sales in the next couple weeks, next couple years for this game or that mini game. Arguably, maybe you could roll the dice and just assume that maybe Square Enix is really struggling and they would actually go out of business, and then some other company would acquire the Final Fantasy games and sell them cheaper. But I mean, that is a out of the field home run theory. It's not something that would likely happen. Call of Duty Vanguard and Warzone Season 4 content roadmap has been revealed. If you want to check that out from Video Games Chronicles. The Xbox Summer Game Fest event is going to include over 30 game demos next week, which really seems crazy that you would have an Xbox, Microsoft, Xbox and Bethesda showcase, then an Xbox and Bethesda showcase extended, and then a week later you're having the Xbox Summer Game Fest. It's a lot, certainly. And if they're going to show us a picture of each of these games, nope, seems like they're only showing 3 of these games. Unless this page just did not load all the way. Let's reload and see what happens. Nope, it just kind of ends there. 30 more games is kind of crazy. 30 more games that very possibly won't even come out this year. The Forza director insists, quote, "We are not misleading you," end quote, over the in-game ray tracing. When you're racing and when you're playing the game, ray tracing is on. I guess this is because this can cause some level of confusion as far as they were saying that ray tracing would happen on the track, but not likely, it was not going to likely affect objects out on the sides of the track, which kind of makes sense. Like, while it would be nice to be racing through a forest and see ray tracing effects happen through a forest, I think you can probably get away with saving some processing power and just not have ray tracing on, and instead using older, cheaper technologies, more efficient technologies, but less visually polished technologies. Moving on, Good Old Games has added a new free game to its summer sale. Beautiful Desolation is currently free to claim until June 20th, which I think I've heard of Beautiful Desolation, but I couldn't really tell you anything about it. Definitely looks weird. And I do tend to like weird. Is this all the same game? Or are you showing me multiple games? Yeah, I don't know if I actually have seen anything about this game, Beautiful Desolation. It kind of feels like if you're giving it away for free, it would be an older game. I guess it was. It was released in February of 2020. So it must just not have caught my attention. Let's see. Apparently, Capcom wants to know if you'd watch another Capcom showcase. The Resident Evil publisher is surveying fans on the recent digital event, which almost certainly Capcom, as a Japanese company, was probably very iffy on the idea of doing a digital showcase because they're just not used to doing things differently ever, and that a digital showcase is different from what Japanese typically would have done, which would have been to have 2, 3, 4 people sitting at a desk or maybe standing up in front of a camera and then talking about the game. Often they're sitting at a desk talking about a game ad nauseum for an hour or two and showing incredibly small screenshots of the game, having very little visual to show. It is definitely not the polished trailer experience that you would expect from something like E3 or a Western presentation. Although the Capcom showcase was very polished. So they put the effort in, they did a good job. I don't think I heard anybody complain, or I didn't see anything to really complain about the Capcom showcase. So, particularly if you're a Japanese fan, I would imagine filling out that survey and saying, yes, this is the way to go, continue doing it this way, would be helpful if that's what you like. And apparently, for our last Video Games Chronicle article, Call of Duty cheaters are having their weapons taken away from them. The latest cheating mitigation techniques disarms offenders. Wasn't this the game that already made the other players invisible to people labeled as cheaters? Yeah. Cloaking. So, they're just constantly spending energy, the Call of Duty developers, attacking cheaters. So either cheating is just incredibly rampant because of, I assume, bad programming, or they're just really obsessed about dealing with cheaters. And yeah, I just don't hear that many people complaining about cheaters. I don't play those kinds of games, so maybe there is a big problem of it. It's very possible there's a big problem of it, but I think that is kind of just something you have to also accept in playing multiplayer games, is that there are going to be people that either feel like they're cheating or actually are cheating. And there's only so much you can do before you're just being ridiculous. I think they've crossed that path. I suppose it is also worth mentioning that even though I doubt the terms of service have really changed, World of Warcraft, when you now log in for the first time, is popping up a separate explicit code of conduct list of rules. It doesn't sound like there's anything too egregious in these code of conduct. It's just like, don't grief people, don't like say hugely offensive things to people, don't harass them, don't make fun of their ethnicity, things like that. General things that you might I wonder if they do that in schools. I haven't even thought of that. I'll have to research that. I could see coming in first day of school every year and being handed a code of conduct as a student and saying, you have to sign this or you can't go to the school. You have to agree to these terms. Yeah, back in my day when I was in school, there was theoretically a rule book that was somewhere, often not actually given to the students, and often more of a living document where they can just add rules whenever. but I don't think there was ever a short or set of rules handed to people as far as these are the rules and you have to sign it and agree to it. There's definitely something manipulative around schools that you're required by law to attend. Also, then trying to get kids to sign things is definitely something unethical about trying to force kids to sign things. I know when kids get in trouble, they often have these uh, discipline reports that they're they force the kids to sign um, on top of the parents signing them. Um, they get sent home to the kids, but to the kids' parents. But yeah, a slight controversy around World of Warcraft, and some of the complaints are definitely worth thinking about. Like the big controversies, particularly around World of Warcraft and Activision Blizzard, is the bad behavior of people who worked at Activision Blizzard, not particularly the players of World of Warcraft. So blaming the players seems very counterproductive and silly. Uh, like I know there's a lot of just like scamming and robbing that happened in World of Warcraft in the old days, and a lot of childish behavior, but I don't really feel like World of Warcraft is an unsafe mental place for people to play. If I had a kid that wanted to play World of Warcraft, I'd be like, all right, fine. Although I'd probably be hesitant to actually let him play just because of the amount of time commitment you'd have to put into World of Warcraft. Moving on, we're to the Gamatsu articles. Digimon Survive release trailer. I think we'd already talked about that. Octopath Traveler Champions of the Continent pre-registration is now available in the West. This is a smartphone game. The Legend of Bumbo is coming to consoles on June 29th. I didn't realize it wasn't actually on consoles already. Or at least it's coming to more consoles on June 29th. Without reading the whole list. Exoprimal has 15 minutes of footage here, extended gameplay preview video. Let's see. Shinji Hashimoto has joined Sony Music Entertainment as senior advisor, and Ford works as a board member. Quote, it might be a bit of time before I can share exactly what I'm working on in these new roles. It probably should be illegal for somebody to be on the board of two different companies or have two jobs at two different companies in general. Like, it probably shouldn't be allowed, because on one hand, if you're really poor and you have two jobs at two different companies, that's a problem. And if you're really rich and you're sitting on the board of 5 different companies and getting $100,000 to literally just pretend like you're doing something when you really aren't, that's a problem too. Although at a certain point I'd prefer the world to embrace universal basic income and just realize that jobs will go away in general, instead of trying to make laws to limit the number of jobs one person can have and the number of hours one person can work. Because there is definitely a scenario where governments try to just maintain the number of jobs through artificial manipulation, and that's not really going to work that well. Shinji Hashimoto was a Square Enix employee for 28 years. And note, he did not join Sony Interactive Entertainment. So it would be interesting if it turns out that in the long run he becomes the new Sony of Japan, Sony Interactive Entertainment boss, and the parent company of Sony in general shifts all the power from Sony Interactive Entertainment, that's in California now, based out of California, over to Sony Music Entertainment. Although he may just not really have any role at all. As far as Forward Works, I have no idea what Forward Works would have. Let's see what happens when I click on Forward Works. I don't know if Forward Works is a video game company at all. Okay. It says Forward Works is a video game publisher and developer headquartered in Konan, Minato, Tokyo, Japan, and a subsidiary of Sony Music Entertainment. Known for Noroko, World Witches, United Fronts, Disgaea RPG, and Mingo. So, kind of a small subsidiary, it feels like. Moving on, Fist Forged and Shadow Torch for Switch launches July 12th in the West, according to Gematsu. We have about 10 more articles. Inertial Drift Twilight Revels Edition has been announced for the PS5 and Xbox Series. I guess this is a racing game. Doesn't look terrible. Not particularly interesting though. The Famitsu sales have been updated for this week, with Demon Slayer for the Nintendo Switch taking the #1 spot. Mario Strikers, which I heard wasn't really that good of a game, still selling 30,000 units compared to 90,000 of Demon Slayer. Nintendo Switch Sports selling 20,000. Kirby and the Forgotten Lands selling 11,000. Not really a lot of new games, so it's not super surprising that we see a lot of swings as far as the #1 spot. It might be better for the video game industry if there was something that just held the #1 spot for a long time, but that pretty much would have just been something like Minecraft, and I don't know if that is better or worse. It probably is worse. Probably is better to see that the gaming community is always interested in the next game to come out and wants to see new games come out, and it hasn't just become stagnant and satisfied with Minecraft. If Minecraft was the game to end all games and nobody wanted to play anything other than Minecraft, then the game industry would suffer from that. Let's see, Labyrinth of the Galleria, the Moon Society, is coming to PS4, PS5, Switch, and PC in early 2023. This looks like a JRPG, turn-based JRPG. Let's see. Look at it through the blur and get a general idea. Looks kind of like a Disgaea-based game. Yep, just looks like a dungeon crawling game. No real interest. Still seeing a lot of those get announced. Sword and Fairy Together Forever for the PS4 and PS5 launches August 4th. This, I believe, is a Chinese game, or it's based on Chinese mythos. It's an action RPG. And it's kind of a unique game in that it's seemingly only focusing on PlayStation, whereas we've pretty much seen the end of Asian games only releasing on PlayStation in the past year. At best, Asian games release on the Switch and the PlayStation, or PlayStation and PC. Summum Eternia is now available for early access. What is this kind of game? They're saying it's a roguelite. Yep, it does look like a roguelite. It does look like it may be a little too much visually. There's a lot of physics, particle physics, in every hack and slash and attack. So that could be visually tiring. Could also be a fairly difficult game by the looks of it. So it definitely feels like a game that could be quite the challenge and intriguing because it's quite the challenge, or it could just be too challenging and then frustrating. Moving on, a 150 micro games collection called Atari Mania for Switch, PC, and Atari VCS are coming out this summer. And I would have to assume these are Atari games inspired and not like bits and pieces of actual Atari games. And I would almost assume that this is kind of like a WarioWare type game where you're going to jump through one micro game to the next micro game. I definitely don't have any faith in Atari or the company that bought the rights to Atari. So, like, I definitely don't have any faith in this game. And that really wouldn't be that interesting. I think WarioWare games are better in that they're maybe animated in a weird way, but at least animated in a modern style. A game called Mages teases a company called Mages teases an English version of Anonymous Code. The quote here is soon. So they're gonna localize the visual novel, which I guess is good to hear. That is basically the only visual novel news we have today. The Overwatch 2 content roadmap has been detailed and beta signups are now available. I talked about my favorite lewd mobile game, Destiny Child. I do almost every stream. I'm a walking billboard for it, even though I don't try to be. But the company that makes that shift up, they have their new game, Nikke, Nikke. And apparently either they have it going in beta form, or they just have not released it on the Android Play Store. Maybe it doesn't support my phone. That could be it too. I have a kind of old phone, so but yeah, their new game, I'm kind of irritated that they haven't released it or made it so I could play it. Let's see. Although I was really more than likely just going to play Nikke for 5 minutes and then realize it's not really worth my time. But also, if I find out that it is my phone and it has been released for a couple months and then I'm a couple months behind, that would suck too. Let's see. Moving on, Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate is coming to Steam on June 17th. We already know that. Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis closed beta test is set for 2022. This is a mobile phone game. Dragon's Dogma 2 announced. Do they have any real visual content? Yeah, this is more of a traditional Japanese presentation, is that we're going to have somebody sitting at the desk. In this case, they've brought it down to just one person, and then they're going to show very little cutscenes. In this case, they're showing content for older games and other things they've worked on. So then there's a real question as to, is anything that's being shown here at the end even Dragon's Dogma 2? Yep, two people sitting across the table talking. I half suspect that is how a lot of business in Japan, here you go, 3 people sitting across tables very far away, but no masks, just sitting far away. So I guess that's the level of their COVID feelings in Japan. Like, one would assume that this is Dragon's Dogma 1 as reference. I wouldn't be surprised if this is exactly how business is done in Japan. It's just a lot of sitting around tables and talking. It's probably how a lot of business is done all around the world. There's a lot of pointless talk, very little programming, very little animating, very little work being actually done by the upper creative people or the people making the decisions. Moving on, Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion announced for basically everything. Got 2 more articles. And then Final Fantasy Rebirth announced for the PS5. And then Pokemon Snap. So that's everything. As far as news, let me somewhat quickly just scroll down my Twitter feed to see if any new news happened. And then otherwise, I think we are fairly safe to wrap up this Friday stream. We're not going late into the middle of the night, which is good. We started a little bit later, which maybe allowed me to be a little bit more awake. They're apparently already working on the 3rd Final Fantasy VII Remake game, or at least some of the staff is, which would make sense. That, like, the writers could move on to the 3rd game if they've already written the story for the 2nd game. Let's see. One thing, by starting a little bit later, it does allow for me to make an hour-long episode of Chariot. And even an hour-long episode is probably more than I should do. Like, it would probably be better to do 30-minute episodes. Although I will say, Chariot, the levels seem like they're getting longer and longer, even though they're not really adding any gameplay complexity to it. It's just the distance from point A to point B is getting longer. It's still scrolling down. Let's see what this article's about. Monolith Productions is hiring advanced artists to make some kind of, I imagine, DC game. Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman. Still scrolling down. Right, that's in that. So there's a GameDeveloper.com article here that says Ubisoft responds to legislation targeting women and LGBTQ Americans. I don't know what legislation they're specifically talking about LGBTQ Americans, but I know that there is definitely talk of them laying the groundwork of the Supreme Court just coming out and repealing Roe versus Wade, although both the protesting against that seems to have died down a little bit, and talk of that seems to have died down. So I almost assume that they're waiting to repeal Roe versus Wade, or maybe they realize that they might have actual revolution. I guess they're talking about anti-abortion. But what's the LGBTQ laws, though? Now, part of the problem here, certainly, is it's fairly easy to dismiss Ubisoft because they're a French company, and I guess any company can say whatever it wants, but generally I'd like to see all companies should probably stay out of politics. And take note that GameDeveloper.com, instead of seeing Ubisoft say something in support, they Game Developer again just brings up the, in my opinion, still yet to really be improved allegations that have been brought up against Ubisoft, which they've been trying for like 2 years straight. GameDeveloper.com in particular. There's a full quote here. Rashi and I are reaching out today because we've heard that some of you are deeply concerned by recent state legislation affecting LGBTQ and the potential ramifications of upcoming U.S. Supreme Court ruling could have on women as well as trans and non-binary people. Let's see. And then that's where they stopped the quote. So, I guess you'd have to read the whole letter. Says the company is reviewing its benefits package for U.S. employees to ensure them and their families can receive the necessary health care they needed wherever they live in the country. That this is most relevant to employees at Ubisoft Georgia and North Carolina offices. If anything, it seems like this note is kind of an internal note, and it's the right statement to say, hey, we're going to protect our employees and do what we can, instead of putting out a flag-waving message to show support but then really not do anything about it. Let's see. And it certainly doesn't feel like there was anything really offensive in this message. If anything, Ubisoft should be applauded for putting out a message that's not that controversial. As non-controversial as something this controversial can be. Of course, that's not good enough for GameDeveloper.com, because they go, other developers like Bungie and several others have been much more vocal in their support of abortion rights, and then they put in a paragraph here just attacking them with irrelevant information to the story. Yeah, it's kind of stupid. The way Game Developer is constantly like after publishing stories that have just not gone off, even other video game companies are not publishing these stories from Game Developer anymore. Game Developer really just needs to realize that they've lost face there. They've lost a moral high ground, if they ever had one. They've lost momentum. It's just not worth their time to try to reiterate something. It's kind of like how Amber Heard in this post lawsuit interview immediately goes on the news and says she's a victim once again, when legally I think she was pretty much proven that the courts have decided that no, she wasn't. But anyways, I don't want to get into the Johnny Depp Amber Heard nonsense either. But yeah, Amber Heard definitely in that interview made it clear that she is going to die on that hill, and GameDeveloper.com apparently is going to die on the hill of trying to make Ubisoft look like a much worse company than it is. So apparently there's a Wonder Woman game coming out. Oh, there's another thing I was going to rant about, and I didn't have a picture to show you, but I did see it online. The I forget her name in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. April O'Neil. Anyways, Monolith is hiring an advanced artist for this Wonder Woman game. Also a senior sound designer and a lead designer. Just hiring everybody. Lead artist. So in the fighting game that Warner Brothers is characters are in, April O'Neil, I think, is showing up in, maybe not that one. Maybe she's showing up in the Nickelodeon one. Yeah, I bet she's showing up in the Nickelodeon one. So you have this new Ninja Turtles games that came out, and the depiction of April O'Neil there, and pretty much, to my memory, the depiction of April O'Neil anywhere is that she had the yellow jacket. In all fairness, I think in the comic book, April O'Neil may have looked completely different. And they did try to make a Ninja Turtles cartoon that had her as more of a black young girl. And that the character basically was whitewashed for the Ninja Turtle movies, but most people's nostalgia thinks of April O'Neil as kind of a brown-haired white woman in a yellow jumpsuit. And to my memory, on top of that, she has always had a decent amount of cleavage. And yet, in the Nickelodeon game, she is flat as a board. Which, fine, different depiction, whatever. But then you run into the confusion here, where the new Ninja Turtles games, she's back to having a decent amount of cleavage. Now, inherently, I can testify to. I don't. Inherently is the wrong word there. I can anecdotally testify to. I have heard stories from several different females who had body dysmorphia and anxiety when they grew breasts, and they felt like an outsider, and they felt awkward, and that sometimes just happens in puberty regardless. But it is odd to be inconsistent so much, particularly in just that one detail, while April O'Neil from both the new Ninja Turtle games and the fighting game look totally similar in every other aspect. It's weird to have that difference. It's weird to emphasize that difference. In the same way it would be weird if you depicted April O'Neil as being giant G cups too. If you went the other direction and hyperinflated her breasts to a ridiculous comical level, that would stand out in the eyes of kids who are playing these games. Definitely. And we're at the end of a stream, so I won't get into a big rant, but it is weird that some small percentage, yet vocal and impactful percentage of SJWs are pushing for the, I guess, de-genderification of characters, the de-emphasis of characters, the uglyification of female characters often, too, the androgenization of characters. I mean, you could throw a lot of different terms on it, but certainly there seems to be a push in video games in particular, and in animation, to take someone who looked normal. April O'Neil never looked odd. And remember, in the first Ninja Turtle movies, that's a live action movie, so that character was being played by a real person. Um, but yeah, you really shouldn't just. I don't agree with the idea of just androgenizing people and making females who once were uh, well endowed, flat chested, or uglier. The Horizon Forbidden West is another example of that. The remakes of Last of Us kind of feels like they might make those characters a little bit uglier too. Video games have it in the title. They are a audio video medium, and if all games just boil down into ugly looking characters, um, I will slowly lose esteem as far as wanting to play video games. And I think most people will. I don't think I'm an exclusive person there. I've heard probably hundreds of straight females say they prefer to look at attractive females with large breasts and just not androgynous. And sometimes androgynous is fun too, certainly. But generally, people have a idea of what they like to see as far as body types, and it is not what is being presented. There is definitely a danger, like in comic books today, where I am really just bouncing all over the walls, that there is a danger, certainly, in comics where things just get drawn really, really bad. And comics is probably a bad example. Look at like Nickelodeon cartoons or South Park again. The animation is not really appealing. It's not really good. We need to come back to drawing people and depicting people correctly. We have hundreds, if not thousands, of years of Renaissance artists and painters and people who spent their whole life being novices and apprentices and learning to draw humans the way humans actually looked and emphasize the beauty. And a lot of that is just getting thrown away for low effort, bad animation, or just for some other ridiculous moral argument. And it's just not. It's not acceptable in my book. It's not the kind of art I would want to look at. And I think that's probably as good of a place as any to end today's stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.